Hey, my name's Kevin. I'm one of the pastors on staff here. We are in the middle of a series called The Sound of Glory, and we have been in it for quite a while. And if you're new with us, it's a series that speaks to the idea that we believe that we can hear from God. We believe that we can hear from Him in an abundance of different ways. And so as we've been trying to unpack this, we've had a number of different opportunities to hear, but also different means by which we've talked about it. And this morning we're going to be talking about how to hear God in wise counsel. And we're going to be in a little bit in the book of Proverbs. But as we go down that path, I just want to help you kind of set the stage for you in this way. We live in a culture that is filled with information, and that information obviously is at our fingertips. If you have a smartphone or you have a computer, you can Google anything and find out just about anything. Now, Google did put out a disclaimer this week. I don't know if any of you heard the disclaimer. Disclaimer is that they aren't always right, which just really wrecked my day. Because I assumed Google was always right. No, but what they want to be a search engine for information. They don't want to be a source of information. But we live in that age, right? We live in the age of an abundance of information is at our disposal. And therefore, we find ourselves in the most informed place probably in all of history. Knowledge abounds. Education abounds. You can get degrees online. You don't even have to go to a traditional school. So technology has made us more informed. Yet, I would argue, as knowledge has increased, common sense has decreased. You laugh. People still need to be told basic things. I'm beginning to see the news now through the lens of, or reading many things through the lens of, people are just needing to be told basic things of life. When you go outside and it's sunny outside, put on sunscreen. That was literally on the news last night. I was like, oh, I didn't know that. I better put on sunscreen. No, but some basic parenting things are being taught through the news, through online, through all kinds of different mediums. You know, people still need to be told, don't spend more money than you make. It doesn't end well. People need to be told, don't expect money to make you happy. It's not going to make you happy. Well, it'll make a good effort, but it won't make you happy. You know, there's a big sign, I don't know if you've been to the zoo, there's a big sign that says, don't put your hand in the lion's den. Don't leave your kid unattended. Okay. I am struck by what they'll put in cars now. There's a little indicator that tells you there's a kid in the back seat. You ever been in a car and not known a kid is in the back seat? You pick up coffee at McDonald's, go through the drive-thru, big warning sign on a hot cup of coffee. This is hot. Thank you. Yeah, we live in a world where common sense seems to have decreased, but knowledge has increased. Go figure. So with that, if we define wisdom in light of that, if we say wisdom is the application of knowledge, wisdom is the application of what you know, and you apply that to life, wisdom seems to be missing as well. There seems to be a void between what we know and what we do. Because we live in a time where if there was ever a generation that could look back and learn from the past mistakes of history, it would be this one, because it's so readily available and it's really obvious. But yet the nature of us, the nature of humanity, the nature of human beings is, yeah, but we're different. This generation's different. We're different. I'm going to make better choices. And we don't learn. And we don't really apply wisdom to what we know. And so with that, we now move into this idea of not only is wisdom kind of being shortchanged culturally, we also find ourselves to be wise in our own eyes, which is a head scratcher. But it is our reality. It's where we are. So if wisdom is actually more than knowledge, and actually the application of knowledge, knowledge is important, but wisdom takes that knowledge as it moves it beyond behavior and moves it to motive, moves it to heart, moves that to why we do what we do. So we begin to see things differently. Wisdom exposes us to ourselves. Wisdom allows us to wrestle with really what the knowledge is teaching us. All of those things are components of wisdom. And yet, at the same time, a lot of that is just lost on us, lost on people. Largely due to the fact is that we do think we know what we know. And it's hard. It's hard to take wisdom and apply it to the heart without somebody helping us. But I want to introduce you to a guy, and if you've been in the church at all, you know of King Solomon. Even in literature, you know King Solomon. He is considered to be the wisest man who ever lived. Now, a little background on Solomon is that Solomon was the third great king of Israel when it was still unified. He was a son of King David, so there's first Saul, then David, then Solomon. And Solomon is also the son of Bathsheba. Bathsheba was the woman that David had an adulterous affair with. So there is this redemption that takes place. Solomon is something is made good out of something bad, and we get Solomon. Now Solomon becomes king when David dies, and he solidifies the kingship, and God asks him, what do you want? What do you want from me as you become king of my people? And he said, I want wisdom. And so God gives him wisdom. And this is what it says in 1 Kings chapter 4, verses 29 through 31. This is about Solomon. God gave Solomon wisdom and very great insight and a breadth of understanding as measureless as the sand of the seashore. Solomon's wisdom was greater than the wisdom of all the people of the East. Not just a couple of the people of the East, all of them. And greater than all the wisdom of Egypt. He was wiser than anyone else. From all nations, people came to listen to Solomon's wisdom, sent by all the kings of the world who had heard of his wisdom. So he was the king of Israel and wisest person on the planet, and people heard of his fame, and like kings, we're talking kings that are egomaniac kings, like they would send their people to hear from Solomon. That's how wise he was. He was the guy. He was that guy. He's the guy that Trump thinks he is, if you got that. The slow murmur in the room is awesome. If you're online, I said think. But Solomon wrote then in turn the book of Proverbs. He wrote a lot of the wisdom literature in the Bible. And this is the introduction to the book of Proverbs, verse 1 through 7 of chapter 1. It says this: these are the Proverbs of Solomon, David's son, king of Israel. Their purpose is to teach people wisdom and discipline, to help them understand the insights of the wise. Their purpose is to teach people to live disciplined and successful lives, to help them do what is right, just, and fair. These proverbs will give insight to the simple, knowledge and discernment to the young. Let the wise listen to these proverbs and become even wiser. Let those with understanding receive guidance by exploring the meaning of these proverbs and parables, the words of the wise and their riddles. Fear of the Lord is the foundation of true knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and discipline. And if you follow Solomon's life, if you just follow his life and you come to the end of his life and you realize that all of his wisdom didn't prevent him from going off the rails. Solomon goes off the rails. He's told one of the wisest of people, yet he is told a wise statement: don't have multiple wives. That's one of the things that he was told when he was young. He ends up with hundreds of wives and concubines, and they turn his heart away from God. And he ends up in this bad place. And if you read the book of Ecclesiastes, you kind of get this hopeless, he wrote that, you get this hopeless soul. There's no meaning to life. And as he turned away from God, his wisdom turned on him in many ways. And what we see is even the wisest of people, without good counsel, without people around them, without someone to speak into their lives, will move away from God. It's fascinating. And he ends up being the last great king of Israel. He ends up being, his sons divide the nation. His sons are there where it splits. And so you end up with a mess because of the wisest man in the world couldn't stick to wisdom. It's a little scary, but also really true. So what's your relationship with wisdom? That's the question of the morning. What is my relationship? What is your relationship? How do we give and take? How is it received for you? How do you engage wisdom? Are you in search of wisdom? Are you looking for it? Would you know it if you found it? You know, one of the simplest of wise statements is when you go outside, put on sunscreen, right? You don't want to get sunburned. And people go outside without sunscreen and get sunburned. And my natural question is, did you put on sunscreen before you went outside? And that's really not the question to ask, is it? Because that's just irritating. The irritating part of after somebody's in a car accident and they didn't have their seatbelt on and they wouldn't have been injured as bad, well, why didn't you put your seatbelt on? It's the after the fact question that makes no sense. Because now they've learned. Pain is a great teacher. It's the person that's having sunburn and reoccurring accidents without seatbelts that you kind of go, I don't know if you're teachable. Because if pain doesn't teach you, pain's a great teacher. Then I don't know what teaches you. So what is your relationship with knowledge and wisdom then? The question for all of us is, the answer to that question is different for all of us. The answer is, it depends. The answer is, it depends upon what you're asking me about. It depends upon what I want. It depends upon my goal in this conversation. So my relationship with wisdom is tainted by what I want or what I need. Because I'll take it or leave it depending upon what it is that I want in my head. Well, wisdom in and of itself is designed to move us to a place where we would live lives that are a little bit different. So all of us have made mistakes. All of us have engaged in wisdom and walked away going, I don't think I did that quite right, or I think I didn't learn the lesson or whatever. And I think as we get older, we have a tendency, some of us, to listen a little better. Some of us don't. It's a fascinating thing. It is fascinating to meet somebody in their old age who is not humble and is not teachable. To me, that's fascinating. Because life is nothing but a humbling experience. Anyway, I'm going to share with you one of my humbling experiences. This was painful in the first two services, and now I'm really not liking to tell this story because people talk to me about it afterwards. So as I got older, I realized that I had to save for retirement. And so I opened an IRA. That's an individual retirement account. And, I went to school for business and finance, so I thought, I'll just manage it myself. And I have a little bit of an interest in the stock market, and so I've kind of watched it, played with it a little bit. And so I enrolled in a newsletter, a company that sends out newsletters, tells you what stocks to buy and when to sell them and all that kind of stuff. And I thought, this will work. So they send me, I get this open, and they send me my first newsletter. And the first newsletter I get says, buy Netflix. Okay. So I buy Netflix because I don't know what I'm doing really, but I'm taking their advice. I'm seeking wise counsel. And I knew that I didn't know what stocks to buy, so all this is true. So I buy it. $18 a share. Comes back and next month it says buy more Netflix. And I'm like, buy more Netflix? What? You guys, nothing else to do, no research to do, so I buy more Netflix. So this goes on for a few months, and nothing's happening. It's like $18, $20, and it's the only stock I had, so I was like, well, yeah, watch it. So like 6 months in, it doubles. It jumps to $40 a share. And so I get my letter from these people, and they say, keep buying Netflix. And I'm like, it doubled. Nobody's stocks just double. And so I'm like conflicted now. I don't know what to do. And so I doubled my money, so I sold my stocks. Yeah. You got it. That's right. Today, for those of you who care, Netflix is trading at over $400 a share. God didn't want me to retire. No. Anyway, I did get some stock advice after both services, so if anybody in the room has some stock advice, I'm all good. I'll listen, because I stopped listening to wise counsel. I just stopped, because I thought I knew better. I thought they were wrong, even though I had reached out, bought their subscription, listened to them to a point, and I thought, there's no way. Who in the world is going to buy Netflix at more than $40 a share? Apparently, a whole lot of people. So my relationship with wisdom only went so far, right? It only went to this place where I trusted it at this moment. And so I think there's a quote from a guy by the name of Morgan Housel. It says this: there's no amount of intelligence that can be undone by poor emotions and poor behavior. What I mean by behavior is your relationship with greed and fear. Dang it. That was one of those moments. There's one of those moments and in our lives where we go, I know better, when we don't. And so I was smarter then. No, I was not as smart as I thought I was. And there's some pain involved there, right? There's some pain. So now I listen to these guys, and they've done well by me, but I wish I had that moment over. But it is what it is. So how do we hear from God then in wise counsel? That, I don't know if that was a God moment or not a God moment. Maybe he does want me to work until I'm 80, which is fine with me. I'd like to work. But there is this degree of us saying, all right, I'm going to engage to a certain point, and this is where the heart comes into play. Really, it was about my heart. It was like, what if it goes down? What if I lose what I've already made? And so fear began to grip me rather than the wise moment of listening to the person that knew more than me, and I acted on my fear and, to some degree, my greed. Now, there was some greed involved. So there was, because it was doubled. I mean, I had twice as much as I had before. Now I would have way more, but you see what we do. We become smart in our own eyes. And then the wise counsel gets discounted. And my heart was no longer plowed with humility. It was only humbled to a point. And wisdom starts losing its effect on a heart that is prideful. And so I lost that moment. And I paid for it. It's painful. It's painful to talk about it. But it is what it is. And you learn. And you now my relationship with wisdom changes. See, when you engage in a conversation with someone who is wiser than you, they are speaking into a heart that is plowed. Here's some really broad guidelines in this regard. And I'm speaking to this to the room. From my seat, from understanding, when we read that passage of Scripture where it says, the kings of the world sent people to sit at the feet of Solomon, They were seeking wisdom. They were seeking to know. They wanted what somebody else had. And I'm sure there were a lot of nations that didn't send anybody. They had heard of his wisdom but didn't send anybody. They weren't seeking it. And I don't know why this is happening, but the lights are flashing outside. Never mind. Now they stop. Total distraction. Sorry. From up here, it's just like, all right. So wisdom is sought. Wisdom is something you seek out, is something you want. But the heart has to be ready to receive it. If the heart isn't ready to receive it, really what we're engaging in is seeking for someone to agree with us. There's two different things at play in us as human beings. We seek out affirmation or approval. So I got to find somebody who agrees with me and will tell me what I need to hear. And there are moments in our lives when we absolutely need that. We absolutely need somebody to say to us, you're okay, I'm for you, I'm going to affirm you. That's not what I'm talking about. It's important, but it's different. When we are humbled and we realize we don't know what to do and we need to seek wise counsel, we will seek somebody who will speak truth to us, not necessarily what we want to hear. Two different things. So when you're seeking wisdom, what you're seeking is someone who will not just take into consideration your feelings and your emotions, but will actually take into consideration the process that you're going through and the decision you're going through that ultimately will shape your heart. So sometimes they just don't agree with you. It's okay. So if you're sitting in the seat of advisor, if you're sitting in the seat of the counselor, and somebody seeks you out and wants wisdom, you're delivering something that is different than agreement. You're delivering something that speaks to the possibility of a disagreement, a heart change, something they don't want to hear. So be prepared, because oftentimes people confuse these two things, and they will approach someone for wisdom when really what they want is affirmation. So it's one of the first questions I ask people when we sit down to talk. Are you looking for affirmation, or are you looking for an answer, or are you looking for wisdom? And if they say affirmation, I can affirm them. Because if you speak wisdom to somebody who's looking for affirmation, it doesn't work. Because their heart isn't ready. Wisdom requires a heart that is ready to hear it. And so in that, we find ourselves, oftentimes there's the dilemma. The dilemma is, am I ready to hear it? And if I am a person that is seeking it, am I seeking counsel, wise counsel, or am I merely seeking affirmation? So that sits on all the people involved and all of us. So make that honest assessment as you seek wise counsel. So here's a few things, just some guidelines that you can kind of run through your mind. And but before I do that, I want to share with you another story. Back in 1999, Lori and I had been a small group pastor for about 5 years at a large church in Pennsylvania. And it was time for a change, and we knew that, and we'd prayed about that. And we were considering planting a church. And in that consideration of planting a church, we sought wise counsel. And wise counsel often finds itself in three categories, and I'm about to give you those three categories. And so we prayed, and we sought out first family. We talked to family. And it was a great conversation, and they brought things to light that were worth hearing. But what I heard in their conversation, in their advice, was this. Do you know what you're doing? Do you know that you have a young family with 2 young children that you have to support? Don't you know that you already have a good job and security abides there? And what they were giving me counsel out of was out of fear. There was a fear. I get it. I'm their son. They're her daughter. They don't want her to end up, somewhere where she doesn't want to be. And so the counsel came out of fear. And so I put that in this category. Here's the truth. Wisdom that comes from fear is not from God. Now, if they would have asked a bunch of different questions coupled with, how are you planning to hurdle these things, which is what the last group did, it changes the fear question into a, oh, you've thought it through. But that wasn't part of the wise counsel. So it was rooted in fear. Then we went to a group of people that were part of the church that we were at and said, this is what we're thinking about doing. And their response was, well, what will happen to the small group ministry of this church? What will happen to if you leave, what happens to us? So it was a self-protective wise counsel. So that counsel came out of self-protection. So the counselor was trying to extract something from me rather than give me wise counsel. So there's a couple of categories. One is fear, and I'm not saying they didn't say anything worthwhile. They did. They were things to consider. But they weren't things that would come from God. God's motive wasn't self-protection, and it wasn't fear. So now I got to drill down a little bit further, and I started asking some of the people that had no vested interest in what happened. I'm telling you, one of the things you want to seek for in wise counsel, when you look for wise counsel, make sure you talk to somebody who has no vested interest in the outcome. Because they will speak clearer into the situation. Okay? So then we sought out some friends outside of the whole situation and said, okay, this is what we're thinking about doing. What do you think? And we got wise counsel. They said they had no personal agenda. They were able to hear our emotions and be able to say, okay, we're gonna set that aside. I empathize with you. I hear what you're saying, but let's set that aside for now and just talk about what's going to happen or what's going to transpire. It was great. Helped me fixate on what God was doing, not on what I was going to do, and ask questions of God's involvement. And it was what helped us make the decision to plant the church. Wise counsel. We heard from God. We didn't hear from fear, and we didn't hear from other people's agendas. So, but I sought it. The seeking of it is where, all those things are important, and you got to have ears to hear. You got to hear what people are saying, and they just didn't agree with us either. There was a couple of opportunities. They kind of steered me in a direction that I wanted to go in one way, and they kind of steered me another way. It was great, and we ended up going that way. But we were able to hear God in that because the fear was replaced by faith. And the personal agenda was replaced by God's agenda. So as you seek counsel, that's part of your process of doing that. So choose your counsel correctly, and you end up with a heart conversation. The beauty of these guys where they ask questions, and there's kind of, if you are in the seat of the counselor, okay? If you're going to be in that seat, I know I'm jumping around a little bit, sorry. But if you are in the seat of the counselor, so somebody comes to you and says, I want your wise counsel. First off, don't ever give wise counsel unless you're asked. There's a couple reasons for that. First reason, you might not be as smart as you think. Straight up. Or the expert that you think you are. You've all been there. You're sitting around a table, somebody's a self-appointed expert about what you were just talking about. And they go, let me give you some wise counsel. No. See that? Unless I ask for it, don't give it. Unless you ask me for it, I'm not going to give it. Because my heart's not plowed to hear you. And if your heart isn't plowed to hear me, we're wasting our time. The other thing is, people just don't listen to random wisdom. You ever talk to a teenager? You ever talk to a teenager? I love teenagers. They are fantastic. They're some of the most teachable people on the planet and some of the most unteachable people on the planet, all at the same time. But the beauty is that at some point in their lives, in that teenage years, they look at you and go, usually at 11:30 at night, there is this conversation that takes place, a conversation that says, my heart is plowed. They don't say it this way, but talk, give me advice. And if you're not there to seize that moment, whoa, it's killer. Those are some best moments of my life. Sitting and talking to my kids at 11 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night. Because their hearts are plowed. You try to tell them that at 8 o'clock in the morning? Oh, I got a word of wisdom for you this morning. Yeah. It goes, anyway, all that to say, people are like that. They're either prepared or they're not prepared. And if they don't seek it, don't offer. Because what it does is it just drives usually wedges between you and whoever you're trying to give counsel to. If you're sitting in the seat of the counselor, listen very well and actively. Ask questions. Don't merely listen briefly or think you know. Ask questions. Try to get below the knowledge piece. Try to get below the emotion piece. And you get into this realm of having a conversation about motive and why they want to do what they want to do, how God's involved in it. But you got to be able to listen to get there. If you don't listen, it's really hard to give wise counsel. Don't speak in absolutes. And what I mean by that is don't say always and never. God always works this way, or it never works this way, or it's always going to end up this way, because it's just not true. If you read the book of Proverbs, you're going to come across several truth statements when you read them, like train a child in the way he should go and he will not depart from it. You ever heard that before? Some people take that as a promise. It's not a promise. It's a wise statement. It's not a promise, because if you take it as a promise and you train your child in the way that he or she should go and they depart from it, then God failed you. No. There isn't a child on the planet that doesn't depart from the way they should go. If they didn't depart from that, they'd be perfect. They would be, it doesn't work that way. It's not a recipe for perfect success. It's a statement that says, yeah, train your child, and there's a good chance they're going to be in a good place. But you can't, if you take it as a promise, you will be disappointed in God, which is not the point. It's a wise statement, though. If you don't train your child in the way they should go, they're going to pick their own way and do what they want. That's the other side of that coin. Okay. So you listen, don't speak in absolutes, and don't be judgmental. People do stupid stuff all the time. Actually, all of us in this room have done something stupid at some point. And if you're sitting there going, I've never done anything stupid, then you've missed something along the way. Then you've never owned Netflix at $18. This still bothers me. All right. But don't judge. See, that you're sitting, somebody's out there going, yeah, I'd have bought it at $18. I'd have held it until it was $400. See, that's judgment. Now you're judging me. Don't judge me. But what we have a tendency to do is judge behavior, and then we slip into judging motive. When most times what needs to happen is, let's just put behavior on the shelf, because the reality is what happened has happened. God loves you. God's for you. I'm for you. We're having this conversation. No, let's talk about not going there again. Let's talk about how we move in a new direction. And the reality is if you do that and you don't pass judgment on what has transpired, you've got a much better chance to speak truth into the life of somebody than you do if you judge them. Actually, you turn them off if you judge them. I don't want to listen to you if you're going to judge me. If Jesus says, I didn't come into the world to judge the world, nor condemn the world, why do we sit in that condemnation spot so easily? Now, we make judgments all the time. And it's different to judge the situation. It's different to judge the outcome. It's different to judge those things. And you can give wise counsel. Wise counsel ultimately does come up with a judgment. But to judge the heart of somebody is not our job. So don't sit there. Don't stay there. And pray. Pray with them. Pray for God to be in your counsel. Pray that they can move forward. Pray that they can receive it. If God's not involved in the counsel and you're seeking godly counsel, you probably sought the wrong place. There's a lot of wisdom that sits outside of godly counsel. You can get wisdom a bunch of places. You can get wisdom from a drug dealer on a corner. He's figured out how to survive in a different culture. He's figured out how to survive on the streets. He's got wisdom. It's just maybe not rooted in what you want to know. So for us, as we seek wise counsel, here's a few things you can do. Find someone who knows more than you do. That's really important. Oftentimes we just find somebody that's our peer who kind of knows a little bit more, but not a lot. So find someone who knows more than you. Find someone who has done what you are trying to do and has a good result. Find someone who is willing to share their mistakes. Humility. You want humility in whoever it is. Find someone who is a person of high integrity and keep it to themselves. Say, I'm expecting all of you to keep my mistake about Netflix to yourselves. Find someone who can cut through the emotion and not just join into your misery or your euphoria. You've got to find somebody who's willing to cut through it. Find more than one someone, if you can, and make sure they're trustworthy. When we were raising our kids, we looked at each other one day and said, okay, we got to figure out how to do this. We could read a book or we could ask somebody. We chose to ask somebody. That's a different never mind. I'm running out of time. So we looked around and looked for people whose kids we admired, that loved Jesus, a little snarky, a little, had some attitude to them, and they dealt with that because we figured we were going to have kids that needed a little bit of adjustment along the way. No kidding. And so we found some people like that, and we sat with them, and we sought them. Again, wisdom is sought. You seek it. And we asked questions, and they listened, and they helped us. They gave us advice. They gave us godly counsel. They helped us walk through it. They had kids that were older than our kids, and we saw something in them that said, hey, if that worked for them, it might work for us. That's the idea. And our hearts were such that we knew that we didn't know how to do it. So we figured, let's ask. That's seeking wise counsel. It's that simple. But if you're convinced you know, then you're looking for affirmation. I just want somebody to affirm what I'm doing. If what you're doing is not working and you're looking for affirmation, this is going to sound harsh, but this is the way the Bible states it. That's just foolish. If it's not working, I'm going to continue doing it, and I'm going to repeat the behavior, and I'm not going to seek wise counsel. I'm so stuck in my pride that I can't let somebody else speak into my life. We shut off the possibility of hearing from God through wise counsel. Therein lies the dilemma of a culture with lots of information, but is lacking wisdom. So, I invite you into this. I invite you into this idea. I invite you into a relationship with God that says, look, God, I'm looking for the person that can speak into my life, speak into my heart. I'm looking for these type of people, a person that won't judge me, but a person who will speak truth to me, a person that if I can get them to listen to me, can help me, And I want to hear from you in that conversation. You're going to hear from God. You will. Because truth is truth. And you still have the choice. You still have the choice to go, I'm not doing it. Because people do it all the time. You can walk away and go, nah, that may have been godly counsel, but I'm not doing it. No one says it out loud, but people do it all the time because we sell Netflix at 40. It's the same principle. When God said it's going to 400, if you just be patient and just listen to a little advice and you hear me in it, you know what? You make 100 times more. Your life will be that much clearer. So many times in my life, I wish I had listened better. I wish when I was younger, I'd have listened to somebody older. I wish when I was older, I'd listened to somebody younger. And yet, here I am. God loves me. God keeps sending people into my life. I keep seeking wisdom. And I've found that God speaks when I look for it. And I tune my ears. And he invites me over and over again. The invitation is never ending because he puts people around me all the time. He puts people around you all the time. Are you seeking? What's your relationship with wisdom and wise counsel? Let's pray. Jesus, you are a strong tower and full of wisdom. You are a God who loves us in our very prideful place and in our very needy place. I pray we would be people that would seek after wisdom in our lives. I pray that we would hear from you, we would be able to know and discern. And Lord, I pray that we would be diligent in the seeking after hearing from you. Lord, thanks for these few minutes. Thank you that we can have time just to reflect now. I pray that we would sit in that, enjoy that. And thank you for the rain. And it's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.